Welcome to Voices of the Next Economy. I'm joined today with Cecile Green. We're going to share our work together. Cecile, thank you for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome, Tammy. I'm delighted to be here with you.
Wonderful. So the question that I've been starting these with is, are you concerned about the state of the world today?
Yes, most certainly, absolutely concerned about the state of the world today. Yeah, in particular, there's so many crises, so many overlapping crises and wicked problems that it seems like it's a dire situation indeed. But yeah, to answer your question, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that we can turn things around?
I do. My particular focus is on how we use and distribute power. My contention is that all of the crises that we do face share an overlapping issue, which is power, how it's used, how it's distributed. And even underlying our monetary system, money represents power. So I believe it's one of the most fundamental issues that we face, and that we can actually concretely get in and work that to a healthier place every day. So that gives me hope that we can actually do something about the situation.
Yes, yes, thank you. And yeah, you already sort of answered a little bit of the how, but maybe we can talk a little bit about the challenges in the way of that how. Like, what are the challenges we need to face to be able to deal with power differently?
Well, from where I sit at the moment, one of the biggest challenges is recognition that this is a cutting leverage point, a cutting edge leverage point for us as a species, even amongst people who are, for example, working the next economy edge, recognizing that power is actually the fundamental issue. Is one of the challenges I face. And so it really comes down to articulating the particular benefits that it delivers to actually address our power use between each other, even those of us who are facing into a new future with hope. So concrete things like making better decisions together, being able to innovate more effectively, being able to get more engagement and buy-in are simple consequences of using power better between us.
Yes. So today we're doing a shared power experiment.
We are.
We're wanting to share each other's work and ask some good questions about the motivations and intentions and the why of what we do, as well as the what of what we do. And so I'm really looking forward today to being able to model what shared power can look like.
Indeed. And to that end, Tammy, I would love to hear you answer those questions. What brings you here, and how do you feel about the state of the world?
Well, I'm absolutely concerned about the state of the world today. I feel it in my body. I feel it as a human. When I see the news, when I see what is happening in the world today, I feel it at a visceral level. I also see so many people that are working in so many different disciplines to meet those challenges. And so I see this beautiful dichotomy of challenge and action that is gives me hope. I do feel that we can turn things around. And I think that the way that we need to do that is through the many different modalities that people have been creating together and in separate silos. And that if we can link those together, and if we can support each other's work, we can begin to create more understanding with people that maybe don't realize that all of this work is happening all over the world. And so having these conversations, these peer-to-peer conversations where we can discover what each other are doing, is the modality that I can see that can kind of step by step create the awareness, create some real potentials for collaboration, as well as the understanding of what it is that we're meeting as far as the challenge, as well as what's possible and who's doing what out there, because it's powerfully profound and inspiring what's actually happening. and I just want to surface that work.
That's beautiful, Tammy. It meets such a need. I can most certainly validate the absolute kind of lack of traction that I feel in the fact that we are not connected as one movement, sharing all of our gifts and talents, co-supporting each other. So thank you. You absolutely articulate a profound need, and thank you for stepping in to help make that happen.
Thank you. One, I'll just share also, there's the Impact Economy Summit coming up this October 5th to 9th in Whistler. And it's put on by the Citizens Media and Caroline Smalley, who's been working hard over nearly the last decade to create new systems. And there's so many of us that are doing that. But she's taken action, and she's bringing together thought leaders from all over the world in currency, peer-to-peer systems, new media, and really wanting to drive interest and participation to powerful projects that are happening on the ground and how to fund them. So as part of that, I had the absolute honor and pleasure meeting Andrew Bindewald, who came through Vancouver the other day. He's taking a week on Vancouver Island prior to the summit. And he suggested to me to watch Tomorrowland. So I did that last night. And, you know, we are building our future together. And we do have this ongoing set of memes about how terrible everything is. But that's our mistake, because we can look at the powerful things that are happening, the Impact Economy Summit, the work that you're doing, the work of all of the participants that are coming, the work of so many people all around the world in creating these solutions. And so, you know, I think that we need to turn the light on that, and we need to be able to see it, understand it, and start working together more closely. So I do recommend Tomorrowland, even though it's got some fatal flaws, like it's not one person that's going to do this. It's all of us together, and I think that that's the critical jump that we need to make. It's not about one person doing something. It's about all of us finding how our gifts and how our abilities and how our work that we put out in the world can work together.
Nicely said, Tammy. Yeah. And you in particular do this through this type of dialogue platform, correct? Do you have other ways in which you see the convening of conversations and efforts being facilitated?
I would love to see all kinds of different innovations in this area, and I'm, you know, open to learning what other people are doing. I see the conversation as a natural space of collaboration, and if you create media from that, you are able to you're able to replicate that, and I noticed you popped off for a second. The glitches of these podcasts.
I think I'm in the moment.
No worries. Yeah. So for me, it's just about being on the record. That's the critical thing that I see. It doesn't mean that everything has to be put out there and viewed by people. It just means that we're presenting our work for the record, so we can learn how we present our stuff. So we can have a record of where we have points of complementarity and points of contention, and so that we can really identify what it is that we're doing and learn how to tell our own stories. So for me, it's not simple one-stop shop. It's like it's an inquiry. How do we do this? Yeah. And how can we help each other to create media that's representative of the work that we do, that helps to engage people to participate in the way that we need, and then direct this inquiry. You know, like, we all have the ability to ask our own questions, which is that's the critical path. We follow our inquiry. What we build is what we look at. And in the Tomorrowland movie, one of the pieces that they talked about was the two wolves, and you know, there's the wolf that is, you know, hungry and in pain, and then there's the wolf that's hopeful. And which wolf wins? And the answer is the one that you feed.
Indeed, indeed.
And so what
Yeah.
I'd like to do is feed into an ongoing dialogue that everyone participates in, everyone who
Yeah.
can, everyone that wants to, so that we
Mhm.
can collectively see this tapestry of goodness that and powerful intellectual thought and our dreams and hopes and visions for the world, so that we can see that together.
Yeah. Yeah, boy, hearing you talk, Tammy, what's resonating for me is the kind of, it's like it's a tuning fork. When you hit a tuning fork and it creates a sound and a space around it, I feel you wanting to strike the collective tuning fork for what's emerging and really enable that possibility, and move from this paradigm of the individual heroic leader, which we all have to be to some extent. That's the paradigm we've come from, right? And we all are deeply called, because of the state of the world, to stretch and move and become our absolute best selves, right? But it's completely, utterly limited. And
Yeah.
the next paradigm emerging is this collective paradigm, and yet it has very little capacity. It has very little consciousness of itself, even. And I see your work as kind of standing forward as a light bearer into that space and saying, we're here. We're here. Look, we are here, not just the individuals. Yes, we're made up of individuals, but it's not just the individuals anymore. And
Yes.
that's a very powerful move. And again, I want to thank you for that service. It's often undervalued, often underrepresented. Facilitators are usually, if they do well, they're not seen. And
Right.
so I take a moment to see you and your work, and this profound service of calling the collective into itself, through the process of seeing each other and valuing each other's gifts and capacities. So
Thank you. Thank you. I'd love to take a moment to explore a bit about your work, because our work so beautifully intersects. And I just
yeah.
wanted to invite you to share what it is that you're most motivated to work on right now, and some of your projects.
Thank you, Tammy. Yeah, so my focus is power, as I mentioned earlier, and what I mean by that is human social power. Power actually, as I define it, as the force of enactment, is everything in the universe kind of moving into being. But human social power represents a really particularly challenging point, I believe, for us as a species right now. And while I've taken time to kind of digest the academic literature and get published academically on a new theory of power, a map of kind of what we're concretely doing every day when we work together. What I was most curious about is the practical day-to-day applications. Like, how does it make a difference when you and I are working together and sharing power? And so my particular passion is teaching people who are interested this way of communicating that delivers healthy power use between us, so that we all have a chance to step forward, share our gifts, and become profoundly aware and capable in this collective dimension, right? Again, as with you, as I mentioned with you, it's this collective dimension is underappreciated and undervalued and underleveraged tremendously. And so the work I do is called CoLab, COLLAB, and it's a practice for building a healthy collaborative venture together, which really does feel a lot better. It's far more joyful. So it really lights me up to teach this work, which is actually pretty simple, learnable, transferable, and spreadable to folks who are curious and who really want to lean into what it means to be a collective, to be collaborative, to use shared leadership together. So that's my passion. We teach it through a variety of both online courses and collaborative leadership certification and one-on-one coaching, and are available to do this with folks all over the world. But in particular, we really work with people who are trying to bring in this new generative edge. So
Yes.
the social entrepreneurs out there who are really keenly vested in bringing this new healthy world about.
Thank you so much for doing that work. I think that that shared power piece is kind of the nuts and bolts of how it is that we're going to be in our doing. So I really respect and honor that piece.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's surprising. Go ahead, Tammy.
yeah, I'm just wondering, as far as the nuts and bolts of doing that, what are some of the tools that you use? Like not to go too uh, deeply into the details, but it is important to know, like, how do you share power?
That's such a great question. And one of the key things that I discovered in my journey, which has been about 30 years in the making as a social entrepreneur, is that one of the places we can get in and concretely, surgically operate on power flows is when we communicate. So it's as simple as giving space to another person to speak. Can be,
Listening.
right? Listening, right? And not just listening so that you can then jump in, but like listening with inquiry, right? What is that inquiry? What is that space of inquiry? And perhaps most importantly, what I found is that it's about practices that we share. So collective practices for listening and using communication in a more generative way. And so let me get specific. One of the tools that we've developed is this thing that we call the standard meeting practice, which is a simple flow for meetings when we have work to do together. Like there's something that we're trying to achieve together. This standard meeting practice gives us a template that allows us to cover all of the basic information we need, from how am I doing personally, like what's my personal state stepping into this room, to what are the projects I've said I'm accountable for, how am I doing on those, to what are the issues and tensions that are currently coming up, and how do we need to evolve the organization or what we're doing together going forward. And then, you know, the wrap up and closing out again. So it becomes this really beautiful ritual, which we all understand and can step into with our power. And those of us who tend to speak more can be held by the process to leave room for those of us who speak less. Those of us who speak less are invited into the process to contribute more. And it really balances that use of power in multiple ways. The examples I just gave were very simple, but everything from, you know, who does get to make that decision?
Yes.
Why make it? Are we making it together? If we're making it together, do we know when we're done making that decision and what the outcomes of that are? And one other really concrete thing, Tammy, is tracking. Like, how do we track information that we come up with as a collective is power, right? Information is power. And so how that information is transferred and tracked is also one of the very simple foundational tools that we found is critical to actually sharing power.
Yes.
Well, those are a few examples.
That's fantastic. I mean, I love the concrete, because at the end of the day, having people walk away with some tools that they can use that's what's important. I'd also like to reflect that this is very similar to in Spiral. Chloe Waratini was sharing when I was in Montreal at Sensorica about their process, and they start the day with a check-in, and they you know, their meetings are very much the same. Bring your whole self, be who you are, and that those pieces of being able to have that ritual, that open, that honoring of each person's time, and that close, because there is a natural thing as humans for us that we can just sit in that framework and really feel that we are a part of a group. So yes, thank you for that. That's amazing work.
Yeah, thank you, Tammy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's a joy to bring it and to share it, and it's quite satisfying to see how quickly and simply it can make a difference for people in their work with each other.
And I love that it does bring it on so many different levels, and the most important one being the human one. We are humans first, and so bringing ourselves in that way and finding ways to communicate who we are in a safe way, that's the baseline. And
absolutely.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah. So one of the fun things I've found is that through searching for patterns of healthy power use, there are some really common themes. So you spoke of Inspiral. You know, it's what I'm seeing is all around the world. There are people who are part of this next stage of organization who are stumbling into this territory that I call the territory of shared leadership and trying to make sense of it, right? It's a new territory, really, as a species. We've inherited millennia of autocratic top-down power use, which we are seeing play itself out on the world stage in endless toxicity at this point. And there are so many of us who are aware and wanting something new and kind of leaning into and bringing into being this new level of leadership called shared leadership. And it's a new territory, much like any of the pioneers who went into the wilderness or space, travelers going out into the territory beyond Earth. It's unexplored. And so the key things that I found were critical to that are a clear map of the territory, right? If you're going into the wilderness, what are the two things you would bring with you? A map and some kind of vehicle or set of tools to traverse that terrain safely.
Yes.
And so it's that map and that set of tools that we've kind of put together in CoLab, and there are others out there who are doing the same. They are exploring, they're trying to understand, they're trying to make meaning and make it a more accessible place, because frankly, until it's explored and understood, it's very hard to bring other people into it.
Yes.
And so I think there's a critical role for pioneers, and deeply grateful for the work of Inspiral and countless other organizations out there like ourselves who are kind of cutting the new grooves into this territory, so that others can follow.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So one of the pieces that I love doing one-on-ones, because you can do a bit of a deep dive into each other's work, but
Yeah.
where I think that this kind of modality of utilizing communication tools differently can have great strength is where three or more are gathered, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if we had another person in this podcast, there's another dynamic that's not a binary, but now a trinary, that
Yes.
we can really start to have those natural questions emerge that anyone would have. And so I would, as a follow-up to this, I would love to think into a third person that we could have a conversation with in the future, or that we could each kind of score off. And but I think it is the three where really going to be able to create some powerful understanding about collaborative practices and bringing our work together in a way that is a collaboration in and of itself as a conversation.
Yeah. Wow, that's great, Tammy. I'm certainly would love that. I think that again, as a means of kind of opening up the territory to other people, that these types of conversations are critical, right? They create more visibility and understanding and opportunity to kind of gestate on what are we talking about. So totally up for that. And I was also curious for you. I mean, you do these dialogues with people, and it's a way of kind of placing people into this collective space, right? And so I'm curious what you are finding most powerful about these dialogues, and where do things go after the dialogues? How do you see them building towards this collective impact or collective momentum that we're both kind of seeking here?
Well, I would say that I'm still in that transition of finding the ways that people can understand their own power in collaboration with others. And so today I'm incredibly grateful to you to be exploring this together, because this is another step on that journey. I know over this summer has been amazing for me. Huge experiences, great growing. But I've been on rocket mode since May. Not at home for more than a week or two at a time, and going from big event to big event and recording at every one of them.
Wow.
But what's been missing is a collective understanding of the purpose of why we would record ourselves. And so this is the piece that I'm trying to land, is that our conversations are collaborative in nature. And I'm looking for people who want to have for the record conversations intentionally so that we can surface our work and we can play in that space. My intuition is that will be a very powerful exploration and inquiry into where we're going, and can be a tool that we can use to engage our constituencies, our communities, and the wider world in the work that we're doing to help to bring in the participation we might need, or the funding we might need, or just bridge that understanding of that work to make it more visible. So we're still in that process, and today is a really important step for me to be able to move that idea forward with another person.
That makes a lot of sense, Tammy. And again, thank you for kind of doing all this recording and getting the visibility going. It's like, I see you as the, oh, what's a good word? I mean, maybe like an usher or welcomer of people into this collective space. You're like bringing us each in and helping us kind of settle into this new space, whatever it is, collectively. And one of the things I found really powerful in terms of, anytime that we're trying to build something new together, a really profound and actually not that complicated step to take is to define our purpose together.
Yes.
That act of creating and articulating an explicit purpose that's surfaced from all of the participants.
Yes.
Is transformative. And I found that purpose is really helpful if you construct it from vision, mission, and values. So those are three different things. Vision being like, what's the difference we want to make in the world? As a collective, like, what difference would we want to see out there as a result of the work we're going to do? And then mission is kind of, what's our unique work?
Yes.
In this collective space. And the last is values, which is what it sounds like. What are the principles within which we agree to abide? And then from that kind of kernel of vision, mission, and values, the rest of the effort can easily crystallize. Like, people can self-locate, like, oh, well, I can contribute this part towards that purpose, or I can contribute that part. And so it becomes this unifying North Star that we can look to. We can continue to evolve, right? Because that's another problem I see with a lot of collective efforts, is that purposes are treated as these static objects,
yes.
which they're really not, ever, right? But we want something that kind of stays in one place. And so as humans, I think we try to think of these as fixed, but it's frankly better to relate to them, I find, as practices. And so what's our purpose practice, as
yes.
opposed to what's our purpose once and for all? So the trick I find is in getting a collective to agree to a process, a practice around which we're going to create this, or through which we will create our purpose together, and then iterate it over time. But it's entirely doable. It's just that's kind of the next step. It's like, once everyone's in the room, okay, what's next?
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm wondering if we just jump into doing that as a small exercise. Between.
Oh, I love.
So yeah, what's your vision?
Well, my vision of, do we have a name? Do we have any kind of, like, what do we want to call this amorphic thing we're talking about?
Well, we are talking about systems change, and we're talking about social change, and we're talking about economic change.
Yes.
I think this systems change piece is really where we're kind of at. So what is our vision for systems change? Perhaps, how does that feel?
Yeah, great. That sounds wonderful. So my vision, I guess, would be that we have a world of generative systems. So we have a world of systems that are virtuous. They are based on a virtuous cycle as opposed to a destructive cycle. Right now, we're based in a world of systems that are largely destructive, and then a bunch of them that are kind of trying to, deal with the fact that there's so much destruction going on. But we're basically caught up in this cycle of destruction and repair, as opposed to cycles of continuously creating something better. So generative systems. How about you? What would you say for vision?
I would absolutely agree with that. And what I would add would be to have ways for us to see ourselves and to be able to include more voices in the conversation,
Mm.
so that we can each have. I think that we need each person on the planet to be able to connect with the economy, for example. I think that would be a huge vision if we all had agency and the ability to participate with our economy. That's a big vision as far as systems change for me.
Oh my gosh,
And
wonderful.
and so generative, yes, generative ways for us to be able to explore that and to be actually able to do it.
Yeah,
Um, yeah.
yeah,
So
fantastic.
a people-centered economy is kind of the thing that I think about a lot, is how can
Yeah,
we all be able to participate in the economy as a baseline right as humans.
yeah,
As so I believe that the economy is something that's created by humans, but it hasn't been thoughtfully created. And
mm,
so I think a vision for the future needs to include how it is that we can have everyone on the planet have access to the economy in a fair and just way.
oh my gosh, that's wonderful. One of the things I like about what you're saying, Tammy, is that it's so specific. So one of the cool things I've found with kind of this three constructs, vision, mission, and values as part of our purpose, is that we can then define metrics for each of those.
Yes.
So a vision of a generative economy, well, that's great, but it's pretty pie in the sky. What you've shared is very concrete. It's like that's the metric of that vision, is everyone on the planet has agency in the economy. That's something we could measure. That's something that we could track in terms of, are we on track? Are we heading towards this vision that we want together or not?
Yes.
Um, and there's something very, very helpful about having concrete like metrics like that to steer towards and to measure whether or not we're doing what we say we want to do as a group. And then we can course correct if we need to, right?
Yes. And I guess that is leaning into the mission, right? That's more of a mission
Yeah.
than a vision, or it's a blend.
Well, yeah, exactly, exactly. So what would let's say that the vision was a generative economy. One of the metrics was every individual has agency in the economy. What would the work of this emerging collective be to make that, to bring that into being? What would we do together? What would our work be? And it could be many things, but like, what would like the overarching bucket of work be to bring that about?
Well, for me, I think that it is the end game is the global wallet.
Mm,
And I see that as something that, I'm on the board of a small credit union, and for the last 7 years, so I've been really thinking into um, a people-based economy from that space of financial services.
yeah.
And I think that I see what's happening in the space of financial institutions. They're being disintermediated, as they call it. They call it disruption. They're not really needed in the world that's coming, and yet,
Mm,
and so there's all of these different tools that are being created to be able to transfer money or value. And so this is a very, very rich space, and kind of why I feel that this Impact Economy Summit is so important to
mm,
participate in, because there is all of this change in that space. I think
yeah.
that the brass ring, the thing that can change everything, is a global wallet that would be owned by everyone,
Mm,
um, so that we can actually create the economic system and that system of trade with humanity in mind,
yeah.
and with and including the tools that are being developed in collaboration with many, many people. Another piece that I think is really important is that uh, is that this is something that Indigenous people from all around the world can participate in creating and framing from the systems that they've used over millennia to trade. Because I think that there's a lot of untapped wisdom. The sharing economy is a remembrance or return to these Indigenous values. And I think that within Indigenous cultures from all over the world, we can bring in the wisdom and the knowledge of what it is to have an economy that serves people. And so I would look for this, any project that was looking to unite a global wallet, to take, to respectfully approach Indigenous people, to be able to include that existing knowledge and wisdom.
Love it. That's beautiful. So if I were to summarize what I heard, Tammy, it's the mission or the work of this group would be to establish a global wallet.
I think that's, well, I mean, it's a great and grand hope. Yes.
Well, big is good. Big is good. Yeah, that's wonderful. And I also heard you kind of referencing some of the values by which you want to do this, which is through including, especially potentially disenfranchised voices like the Indigenous peoples. But so that's a value. It's like inclusiveness, and harnessing wisdom. That's another value, right? Harnessing existing wisdom. So what other values or principles might be really critical to this collective that's emerging?
Well, definitely your work in shared leadership, because when you're talking about money and means of exchange, there you've got a real a healing, I would say, that needs to happen in relation to how money works in the world now. And so, I think that we need to, the values that need to underpin that is sharing power, and sharing power in a real way. And that's part of why I bring in the Indigenous need to honor, because I think that as we look into how we share power, we can look to these systems that have been in place for thousands and thousands of years of how humanity works in social systems and in trade systems and economic systems that can really help us to, with a return to our humanity. So there's this need, I feel, to bridge to very human ways of being able to leverage each other, give value to the work that we do, understand these different metrics of value that come out of interacting, that come out of the work that we do, that come out of how we share and what we share. And that I mean, it's big with a lot of different pieces to it. So it is complex, but I think that back to the values are human-based. The values are, how can we help each other?
Right.
How can we support each other? How can we understand each other? So that we can see how we can bring each of what we bring and weave them into this tapestry of solutions, and a tapestry of ongoing and generative thought and action.
Yes, indeed. I love you added action. It's really critical. Obviously, you know that. So that's another value, action, that this is concrete, grounded, real, it's happening. I think I would also add this value of, I love that you mentioned kind of what I might call empathy, like listening, inquiry, support, and the value that you mentioned of weaving, like how do we synthesize that's, these various approaches and contributions. So for example, to get concrete and personal, one could see Collab's work in competition with Inspiral's work, right? You could see these are two different offerings, and they could be like at loggerheads with each other. And frankly, that's what our world demands of us, actually requires, our current world requires that we compete. And so we're actually trying to enter a new paradigm where it's not competing, but it's collaborating. And that requires seeing each other, empathizing, valuing, holding each other in high regard, and looking for those points of synthesis and mutual contribution. And so that's also a value I would hold quite highly, is like, what are those places where we can synthesize and create an integrated approach which values the perspectives, as opposed to saying, well, one in this fight, in this competition, one's going to win and one's not going to win. You know, that's it's win-lose, right? So for sure, values of win-win-win and support, empathy, inquiry, contribution, synthesis, all feel really critical to the success of whatever this next thing is.
Yes.
Because if we both carry the values we've had, which is this, you know, and frankly, biologically, you know, we've grown up from the mud and through, you know, very aggressive kind of requirements of evolution to survive. How do we actually literally transcend those? Because if we don't make a focus on that, we won't. Actually, we will simply enter the space with our competitive natures well in place.
Yes.
So it requires quite a bit of effort to transcend that. Certainly something that is attractive to me and would, I think, be critical to this next level of a global wallet, so to speak.
Yes, and co-development. I mean,
yeah,
the global wallet, that's something that I think is like a straight arrow, that if enough people got on that and we actually made it happen, that would be a really critical turning point. And I feel also that any efforts that we make in collaborating and bringing together our work is in great and grand service. One thing that I'd like to throw in right now. Earlier, I talked about points of complementarity and points of contention, and so what you talk about right now, as far as, you know, being in competition with each other, even though you aren't, you know, and that's not the intention, but the world works that way. This work actually comes from a woman that I know here in Vancouver that I met through the food systems, the BC Food Systems Network, and she's the chair and founder of the working group on Indigenous food sovereignty. Her name is Dawn Morrison, and the work that she's developed, I'd love to put you two in contact, because you're both very powerful women in the world, and I think that those connections are great. But that's her work, is to foster cross-cultural dialogues within the BC food systems between Indigenous peoples, who very different approach to. It's not about producing; it's about what's already existing. It's about not the agri-food. It's not the agri-food system. It's a completely different paradigm, and so. What she's designed is this way of holding space for dialogue and doing dialogue across difference, by being able to identify points of complementarity and points of contention, so that can be really surfaced, and it doesn't have to be personal, right?
Yes.
And because it isn't personal, it's just different perspectives that need to be included to have powerful, true, authentic, and generative conversation that can access those, as Dawn calls it, those wicked questions that can make us come to another place of understanding and start to heal some of those points of contention and points of difference.
Indeed. Yes. Well, that sounds wonderful. I would love to get connected to her. And interestingly, Tammy, one of the things you probably don't know about me is that I've been a farmer and a homesteader for 30 years and involved in actively creating a generative neighborhood food system here where we live. So so it sounds like a great fit. I'd love to get to know her a little better.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Well, yes, this is what happens when we get to know each other. We can see how, you know, we are whole people. We have many things that we bring to the table.
Right.
And I would also share, just in that my family, when I was a kid, we homesteaded on the top of a mountain in Nova Scotia for 4 years. So I I had that experience too, and it really helped to form me. I was nine to 13, so it was very generative time and invaluable what you learn.
Yeah, no kidding. Wow. I would love to hear more stories about that. It does sound like quite a formative experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no kidding. Well,
Okay,
Tammy,
let's get to some actions. Let's get to some actions that we can take to help each other.
awesome. You go first.
Okay, so I will introduce you to Don Morrison, and I would love for us to think into someone else that we can have a conversation with to test the model of 3 of us exploring our work together. I would love to share this video, so I would love to put this out there as an example of what it is that people can do when they come with an open mind and heart and want to share each other's work. Yes, those are 3 things I'd like to do.
Wonderful. Well, that sounds great, Tammy. On that note, I would certainly love to share this video, and certainly will help, spread it around through my various social media networks once we have it. And I'm also wondering, Tammy, is there any other way that I can support your work or the work of the impact economy at this point?
Oh, well, sharing the media that's been put out there, the podcasts that have been put out there ahead of time. I'll send you the link to the Impact Economy YouTube channel. So sharing them from there and promoting that in your networks, that's fantastic. One of the things that's very real for me, I suppose, is that I need to find ways to be able to be financially supported for the work that I'm doing. And so there's a crowdfunding opportunity that I have coming up at the end of October that I'm going to take. So sharing that at that time would be amazing.
I would love.
But yeah, more than that, just being able to continue to participate with you. And I'd love in whatever way I can participate in the work that you're doing, I would love to. I'm absolutely in alignment with this, the shared leadership piece, and would love to, any role that you would like or see would be valuable in that effort would be my pleasure. And creating more podcasts. I'd love to create more podcasts with you.
Great. Well, that's actually, interestingly, we are running a free social venture series, and the focus of that is discussing stories and of successful experiences of shared leadership to help spread what's possible out there, and also learning from what hasn't worked. And so we'd love to interview you in particular on your experience of shared leadership in the past, in the present, and just kind of digest tidbits and information for folks to get inspired and to be able to take concrete things in a way that they can try in their own experiences, their own ventures. So I will send you an invite to that series, and we'll see when to schedule that. So, and
Great.
definitely the crowdsourcing campaign that you've got coming up. Would love to get that out there through my networks too.
Okay, perfect. Cecile, thank you so much for doing this experiment. That was fun.
Yay! You too, Tammy. Thank you. And we'll talk soon.
Thank you. Thank you.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.